We're live. Excellent.
Time to do some sharing.
I will share this to my page.
Well,
Welcome to the show.
Well, I'm gonna. Sweet music in the background.
$3 Goodwill.
Nice.
Oh wait, I just lost the video share.
Time to do some sharing.
I will share this to my page. Welcome.
Time to mute that page.
Yes. Share in a group. Share now. I'll share it now. Share to my timeline.
Share to Post-Orthodoxy. Our Post-Orthodoxy Facebook page.
Oh, it's shared there?
Mm-hmm.
That's good.
Gilbert Gidroy likes it.
Already.
Maybe he'll share it.
Say something so Ainsley knows you're here. I'm here.
Right. Oh, hi. That's so nice.
Yeah. Your face is cut off. You're going to have to back up a little bit.
As in, I'm too tall?
I think I need to turn the camera just a little bit towards me because your face is... Let me try a little bit.
Yeah, you're going to do it?
Towards me.
It's a lot.
See what that does.
It's a little better. I just need to make our chat thing smaller.
No, we got plenty of room.
I'll just have to sit back here.
Pat Ryan joined in. Hello,
hey,
Pat Ryan.
Pat Ryan.
Gilbert says hi. Hi, Gilbert. Thanks for tuning in today. We have a nice show. We have topics.
Yes, Dark has lined up a bunch of topics for us.
It's 3:59. It's not 4 o'clock yet. We're not actually starting. Would you like to introduce the show at 4 or should I start?
I think, I'm constantly doing research on how we can improve the intro of the show with the limited equipment that we have.
Yes. Can you turn that music off? Thank you.
And one thing that we're not yet able to do is put a little going live soon.
That's what you're watching right now. And it's 4 o'clock. Hi, and welcome to the Post-Orthodoxy radio show / podcast extravaganza. Today we are going to talk about catastrophizing COVID. We'll talk about that a little bit. We're going to talk about where is the mysterious intellectual elite that so many people are afraid of or are looking for. Who is the intellectual elite and where are they? Which brings us, sort of ties us into the idea of the catch-22 of the Dunning-Kruger effect, which is those that talk don't know and those that know don't talk. So how do we stop listening to people who are talking about stuff they don't know about, and how do we find the people that aren't talking about the stuff that they do know about in this time of trying to find good quality information? And then we're going to play another excerpt from our interview with Hansi Freinacht.
Swedish philosopher.
Live.
From the Swiss Alps.
From the Swiss Alps.
All alone.
Recorded live. Recorded live. And we're going to talk more about metamodernism beyond deconstruction, reconstructing culture on purpose versus running it as code.
Taking back your sovereignty as a creator of culture. You are a creative node of society. Society doesn't exist without humans. Therefore, society is the humans that make it up and their choices.
So these are the topics we're concerned with today. If you would like to join in with your own questions, comments, and you are listening to us on Facebook right now on the live stream, there is a message bar.
It's true.
You can comment and we'll respond. So welcome to the show. I'm your host, Citizen DJ Dark Sevier.
And I'm Ainsley Sevier, media maven,
psychic doula.
Still can't.
Ainsley Sevier.
I believe in that title. I just feel embarrassed saying it.
That's why I said it.
Thanks, mimetic mediator.
Hey, Laszlo joined in. Artie James joined in. Lee Whitney's here. Hi, guys.
Thanks. Our foreign correspondent, Astrid, from Switzerland.
Oh, really? That's fun.
We're going to have a good show today, guys.
So, for those of you that have been following our show for a long time, and those of you that just joined us, we started off as copacetic conversations with our global partner, Mokai Malope, having conversations across partisan lines, while our friend Mokai is in the other country, back in South Africa. Ainsley and I have started Post-Orthodoxy, a show about changing your mind, also about difficult topics and conversations. Also figuring out how to cross boundaries in the lines of laws, rules, and bubbles. And that's where we are right now. So we're in the middle of the show. So if you were a part of the Copacetic Conversations Facebook page, that has now been morphed into the Post-Orthodoxy Facebook page.
We kind of took a social media liberty. You're not really supposed to get a bunch of people behind a certain Facebook page and then change it into another Facebook page. But in this case, Copacetic Conversations is such a sister show with sister concepts to Post-Orthodoxy that we figured it wouldn't be too much of an imposition.
And we figured whenever we get Mokai over here, he would fit into the show just as fine as he did the previous show. So
totally.
We're looking forward to the return whenever that happens.
We've been doing a lot of brainstorming recently about what is the point of Post-Orthodoxy. We have. We do these two-hour radio shows every week, and why, and what are we accomplishing, and what are our goals, and who is our intended audience.
What did we come up with?
We want to research and educate ourselves about, and then reveal to people who care, current structures in the world, break down mentalities around structures that are maybe outdated, where people think we think we know what's going on, but actually come to find out things are being run in a very different way than how we thought they were being run.
Right.
As well as enable ourselves to open our minds and strengthen our minds to be more agile in climbing between different reality bubbles, and expanding our perceptions to understand that there are as many perceptions of reality as there are humans on the planet, as well as finding, sourcing, researching, educating, networking with, and then sharing people and philosophies and groups who are trying to come up with solutions for the problems that we're facing right now on the planet.
So for previous shows, I've been talking about the idea of a kairos, which is ancient Greek concept for a particular moment in time where opportunity is more possible. And I feel like this situation that we're in here with the COVID-19 virus is providing us with a kairos where we're looking at our systems differently. We're looking at our systems of governance differently. We're looking at our work systems, how we work. Do we need to be at work to work? We're looking definitely at our healthcare system as something that might need some scrutiny and revision. And before we go too much further down the road and have answers to these questions provided to us, I think it's a good time for us to explore the questions ourselves as people who are not just consuming culture, but are actively making culture.
Speaking of people who are consuming the show, and I feel actively creating culture, we have Greg Hanley in the house.
Greg Hanley,
Pat
hello.
Ryan, and 3 generations of Gilroys.
Yay!
Welcome
to the show.
Gilbert, his daughter, and her grandparents.
Helena folks in the house.
Thanks, guys.
So these are the things that we're concerned with. And I've made a couple of posts just on my own personal Facebook page recently with perhaps wording that is not easily accessible to the proletariat. So I've been finding a few quotes that are not easy reading, but I feel like carry some germ of information that's important to discuss.
Right.
And even though it's not easy to just drink it down, you might have to
read
pull
it several
some
times,
seeds out and skin it before
Google
you can
some
really
terms.
Google some terms. And I've had people comment that, well, geez, how are the masses going to get that? And it's sent me on a down a road of thinking about the neoconservative Republican trope that came up in the 80s about the elite, the intellectual elite, as though having some kind of superiority in a field
Right.
is a bad thing.
Well, there's just all of this cultural stuff built in, just a ton of shame. There's just so much shame built in. Like, I don't understand that paragraph right away. It must mean something bad about me. Therefore, I'm in danger and have to defend myself. So I will lash out at the person sharing it, who must think really well of themselves. And that's not fair, because we're all equal. All men are created equal. And it's like, that's a conversation to be had.
Right. Well, the melting pot, we're all on the same level playing field is obviously not true.
We definitely don't all have access to the same rights and opportunities. That's
we're
for
not
sure.
on the same playing field right now, and so
maybe we're all equal, as in we're all important in the grand scheme of life and the universe. But not everybody knows how to read.
Right.
And that's not a judgment statement.
Right. No. Some people are better at other things. I think when we try to compare everything equally, it's the same way when in the discussion between the sexes. Women are equal to men. Are women better at some things than men? Are they more natural to some things than men? Yes. Are men better at some things, some particular things than women? Yes. So not having that discussion makes the whole equality thing a little difficult in terms of resolving conflicts in society around sexual roles. The same thing happens when we're talking about who's in charge, who's the authority. Right now we have, by the way, for those of you that, what was the, it's Sexual Assault Awareness Month, by the way. So
in the U.S.?
In the U.S., our two front-running presidential candidates have been charged with sexual assault by various folks. And it's also Sexual Assault Awareness Month.
Our two front-running candidates, as in Biden and Trump.
As in Biden and Trump, the presumed front-runners.
Right.
Biden and Trump. So I think that brings us to an interesting place when we're talking about the elite. What do we mean by the elite, and where are the elite that we want to talk to?
Like, what does that have to do with Sexual Assault Awareness Month?
I just brought it in there because those are, if we're looking at our political elite, there are folks that maybe you wouldn't want to invite over to a cocktail party. And
the
yet
political elite are not necessarily the moral elite or the intellectual elite.
Absolutely. So the political elite have been downplaying the intellectual elite for decades. And I think now when we're in the middle of some difficult choice making and unprecedented event like this at this level of our technology and society, to have this event come in and help us all realize that we're not prepared for this event, or that maybe we need to look at the ecology of our society that maybe led to this event in terms of our health. A lot of people are saying maybe the virus isn't so bad if you have a healthy immune system, and why don't we have healthy immune systems? These are things that we need to be looking at. So I feel like it might be a good time to try to find out who the elite are. Where are the intellectual elite? Who is actually thinking outside of the broken systems that we're fumbling around with duct tape trying to repair?
So you're talking about the intellectual elite in a positive way. Like, there are some people
I've
out there...
changed my mind. Well, I've had a turn.
Well, there are some... Yeah. You're saying intellectual elite as in there are some people out there who are doing a lot of research or a lot of thinking, or have the time or energy to do a lot of research or a lot of thinking, and so therefore they're aware of more things than folks like us who work the day-to-day or a single mom with kids.
Right.
It doesn't make them better than the single mom with kids, but she certainly doesn't have time to read Immanuel Kant before breakfast.
So whenever I said I changed my mind, what I actually mean is I've actually been thinking a lot about this idea of the elite, and who are the elite? Who are our authorities? And when I say authority, I mean somebody who's an author on a subject, somebody who can speak authoritatively on a subject, be it healthcare, be it economy, be it politics. And I'm finding politics a very difficult field to find authoritative voices.
Authoritative meaning
who are not partisan,
trustworthy,
and not partisan,
knowledgeable.
Yes.
Yeah, because you can't just be knowledgeable; you have to also be trustworthy, and you can't just be trustworthy; you have to also be knowledgeable.
So these are the things I've been thinking about.
Huli Nalapo. liked our
Cooley,
video.
thanks for playing. So I have been thinking about the Dunning-Kruger effect. For those of you who are not familiar with the Dunning-Kruger effect, I'm going to read the basic, what comes up first on Google. I encourage you to do some research into the Dunning-Kruger effect. I find it very comforting to have a name for a thing that I've been frustrated for a lot of my life. But the definition that immediately comes up is, in the field of psychology, the Dunning-Kruger effect is a cognitive bias in which people with low ability at a task overestimate their ability. It is related to the cognitive bias of illusory superiority and comes from the inability of people to recognize their lack of ability.
As in, you think you're pretty swell.
Yeah.
And you might not actually be.
So the idea is there's a tendency of people with low ability to overesteem their ability, and people who have high ability in the field to undersell their ability. So when you're looking for an authority in politics or medicine or so and so, somebody who actually might be doing the good research and have a good sort of take on what's going on, or saying, well, I'm sure there's people out there smarter than me, so I'm not going to rush with my thing.
So
whereas other people who will put together some specious idea and it makes sense.
Memes and articles.
They will rush to the front and say, I figured out COVID-19. I've figured out the economy. And so there's an old phrase in, I guess, Western mystics, sort of Masonic thinking, which is, those that talk don't know, those that know don't talk. And I think it was an early name or an early phrase to help describe.
She just dropped it.
We have to shut Billie Jean out because
we're gonna try it and see if she just cries outside the door the whole time.
She gets excited by the topic and then she starts squeaking a toy. Billie Jean's very interested in the Dunning-Kruger effect, obviously. So
Billie Jean is not at all worried. She has total confidence in her abilities. Billie Jean is not at all worried that she might not be the best.
So the idea of those that know don't talk and those that talk don't know is basically an early understanding of the Dunning-Kruger effect. And so how do we find people who actually know, who aren't confident enough or aren't egotistical enough or don't feel like they have all the information together enough to come forward with useful information and perspectives that might help us take advantage of this portal in time where radical change could occur. Like, I don't think anybody could have imagined that we would not have basketball suddenly.
Right.
That's something that I took as like, well, if that can happen, many other radical things can happen, not necessarily negative, not necessarily scary. But it's going to require the people who are making culture to make some moves, which is not 90% of the people. That's really like 5-10% of folks who can articulate a better path will end up getting the mass amount of people to follow them if they can say it in a way that makes sense. So this is a time for that 5 or 10%, the elite, who have been working for a long time to say, you know what, our economic system isn't fair. There's income inequality, that's not fair. We should be fixing that. The problem is discernible, and we can come up with a problem. There's just the momentum of culture that's making it difficult to have the dialogue. So there's the notion that we have the solutions to many of our problems, but we cannot implement the solutions because of difference in opinions on how to do it or what to do. But it doesn't mean that we don't have the solutions to our problems, ecologically, economically, sociologically, educationally.
There's plenty to go around. There's just differences of opinion about how to share it.
So I thought the catch-22 of the Dunning-Kruger effect is, if I stand up and say, you know what, I think I got a pretty good idea of what's going on, I instantly feel in danger of being the guy on the wrong end of the Dunning-Kruger effect. So how do you know where your level of expertise is? How do you confidently say, I could confidently give advice on how to set up a tropical organic landscape nursery. I'd call myself superior than most. I would
Right.
call myself.
And you don't worry that you might not be qualified to talk about it.
I'm constantly learning new things about that.
Yeah.
If I'm in the field, I'm constantly learning new things, but I'm not afraid to say, I know how to set that up,
Yeah.
and I'll do it. When it comes to politics, when it comes to the economy, I'm not super confident that I can run out and say, I know what the problem is and we should fix it this way. But I want to at least create a space where we can have those discussions, because I would like to learn more about how to run a sane economy that doesn't create very dangerous income inequality. When I say dangerous, I mean dangerous to the society as a whole.
Right.
I'd like to find out how maybe we could run a healthcare system that isn't necessarily Bernie Sanders or isn't necessarily Mitt Romney's healthcare system. Is there another way? Is there a third way? Is there something? So this is what we're doing here. And if you're interested in these topics, we do have the Post-Orthodoxy Facebook page.
Yeah.
If you would like to share information, we're throughout the week going to be sharing articles, topics of discussion, things that we're doing research for our next week.
Share.
Yes. Mm-hmm. So anyway, that's my opening rant. What do you got?
We had another live stream breakdown.
Oh.
So I've been mitigating my emotions about that.
Yeah. Do you want to talk about that and see if there's anybody in our field of expertise?
If there's anybody out there, it's a complicated setup because I don't have a webcam. I live stream from the phone, and the phone sends it to Facebook, Twitch, and YouTube, and increasingly, pretty reliably, every week, every show, about 15 to 20 minutes into the live stream, the Facebook live stream will just cut out,
dump everybody
off the video, and start a new video.
Yeah.
And I've tried changing bit rate and frame rate and upload speed and video blah 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 settings, and I might just eventually have to not live stream on Facebook or live stream some other way, and I'm not sure what to do.
Right. I have an unfounded conspiracy theory that we get dumped every week just as we start building momentum.
Yeah. We get up to like 15, 20 people and they dump us.
Because we're not giving money to Facebook. And I almost like in a week or so, I would almost like to like pay the $5 or $10 to promote the event to see if we actually get good service, to see if test my hypotheses.
Once you start paying, you have to keep paying.
Doomed forever?
Yeah.
What do you mean?
I mean, algorithmically, it's
oh, you don't go back?
No. I mean, if you pay, say you're a Facebook page trying to promote various events,
right,
or an artist or something, if you ever pay for advertising once and then you stop paying, Facebook algorithm downgrades your priority to even less than it was to before you paid.
Right.
So you might have been getting some nice algorithmic mushy mush before you ever paid for advertising, but once you start paying for advertising, you can't stop, or the algorithm downgrades you.
All right. So anyway, that's another reason to follow the Post-Orthodoxy
Twitch stream
and Facebook page, because when we get dumped, you can just go over there and pick up the new video.
Yep.
So anyway, that's where we are today.
Sorry about that, guys.
Thanks for sticking with the hiccup.
Yeah.
This has become a weekly hiccup.
And I only have so many resources at my disposal to keep trying to fix it.
Right.
So, hey, Paul Niehaus, St. Louis, 710 and 805.
So that's where we are right now.
Yeah. So cultural composting and the Dunning-Kruger effect, for those of you who just joined us, we are the music makers and we are the dreamers of dreams.
That's right.
I've never heard that song, but I love that line. And society doesn't exist without humans. So here on Post-Orthodoxy, Dark and I have been slowly distilling our mission and our role and our job. The best thing you can do is to find your passions and make them your job, so you're not out hustling something else and then trying to fit in your passions on the side. And we're distilling our job here on Post-Orthodoxy into trying to be kind of like a hub. Kind of like we go out and we learn things and we network with the philosophers and the mages and the Merlins and the intellectual elite, and then try to share that info with our loved ones via the Post-Orthodoxy radio show and podcast.
Yeah, I want to get information and then throw it out there and see what sticks.
Yeah.
Seeing if I have people I know I've got people in my friends group that are smarter than I.
The more we
I
can
like
network.
to throw things out and have them tell me where my perception is wrong, or how they can verify that maybe that's a perception that should be pursued. So this idea of cultural composting, I think we would probably get into in the second hour. We're going to play another excerpt from our interview with Hansi Freinacht, talking about postmodernism. The idea of cultural composting is, as a farmer, as an artist, I've always managed to find plenty of supplies for my job at the dump.
Not your job at the dump. You find supplies at the dump for your job.
For my job as an artist and as a farmer.
Right.
So the idea of cultural composting is not just limited to physical objects in my mind. I feel like we've created and manufactured a lot of things. We've created a lot of ideas and a lot of perspectives and a lot of possible avenues. And now it feels like what I thought was happening in 2012, because I watched some videos, that the bubble was going to start contracting the way a wave hits the shore and then starts to go back. I feel like our push towards social media, towards connecting the world, towards developing technology that connects the world, towards systems of distribution so that you can get products and or medicine to anywhere on the planet. These were all sort of amazing things that we've been expanding. I feel like it's time for that to contract. I feel like a little contracting going on. I feel like to coalesce,
to distill,
and to see what we've pulled out. What have we pulled out? So going to the dump, there's a lot of really interesting things in the dump that can be used again. Rather than making new stuff, digging new holes for new resources, we can find the old stuff and make new things out of the old stuff. And I feel like that's kind of where this is a good opportunity for us to be doing that with our ideas, with our systems, our cultural systems and our societal systems. So Hansi Freinacht is one of these guys that I've been following, who is a meta-modernist philosopher who I'm just wading into. And we did an hour-long interview with him, and we've been playing 5 to 10 minute snippets every so often on this show, and then trying to get into what he's saying. Because for me, I'm not a meta-modernist philosopher. I'm grasping to understand how I can use that as just a guy on the street in Butte, Montana. Like, how do I know if I am not just deconstructing my world by being a critic, but how am I also trying to reconstruct or repurpose broken objects that are in our systems? So the idea is, I think, being raised an apocalyptic Christian, the idea was that everything's going to be destroyed and we'll all be leveled and you start over again. And now that I've gotten a little older, I kind of feel like I'd like to take some of the things that we have and keep them, and just maybe repurpose them to something that's not so destructive or is more creative.
Yeah.
So we'll have a little segment of that in the top of the hour.
A little Hansi segment on metamodernism as an alternative to postmodernism, as a growth from postmodernism, rather than deconstructing and analyzing and separating. How can we all come together and be co-creators?
So there's that.
Yeah. So let's have a bit of an awkward conversation then.
Okay.
About the intellectual elite and the Dunning-Kruger effect, and the idea that not everybody, all men may be created equal, but not everybody is born with the same abilities or jobs or roles or purposes, and that therefore not all conversations are productive. Not that all conversations have to be productive, but
right.
if our goal is to try to find a way to remake society so that we don't have to have civil servants painting squares on the sidewalk in major cities so that the homeless people social distance properly. If we're going to try to remake society so that hotel rooms aren't lying empty because tourism has been shut down while homeless people sleep in social distance squares on the pavement, we need to be having productive conversations. And not everybody is a person who will participate in the conversation productively. I'm not saying that with judgment. But if we're going to try to remake society, we need to have productive conversations. And while it might be really fun to get your ire up arguing with people in the mainstream group ocean of Facebook, if we're going to start remaking society so everybody's having a better time and healthier and happier, we kind of need to start talking to productive people. And this is kind of awkward to talk about because nobody likes to think that they couldn't be a philosopher king if they wanted to.
Well, I have a perspective that's made it a bit easier for me to have this conversation. And I want to talk about the function of the anus.
Maybe the feet versus the brain.
Okay.
Because that's a little hard to not just take that one negatively.
So, well, the idea of humanity, we'll just stick it with humanity.
This is a Christian concept. The body has different parts.
Right, I could go with the whole life biome, but I think if we just dealt with humanity, because it's a little easier bridge just to deal with the humans, that if humanity is a body, if there's a body of humanity, that within that functioning body, there are different parts that have different functions. There are the brainy people that think of stuff, and there are muscles that don't really want to think about stuff. They just want to muscle stuff. Like, I feel like people who are loyalists in the Democratic Party or loyalists in the Republican Party, they don't care about logic, reason, truth, or fact. Often in the dialogue. I'm talking about the loyalists. I'm talking about the loyalists, the people that are blue no matter who.
Okay.
When you're in that mode, you're not really looking at the veracity of your choice.
Well, they do care about truth, and for them, truth is that you should vote Democrat or you're a loser.
Is that, well, that's my point. Those are muscles. Those are people that you want on your team when you've chosen a direction.
Yeah.
You want them to push an agenda, and they want to push an agenda.
Yeah.
I would love to say, okay, that's the team that's doing the thing that would make my life better and my neighbor's life better, so I'm going to go push.
Yes,
that
somebody
team.
else has done the work to figure out what team it should be.
They know where the efforts are
and
best
I just
spent.
have to go put in some work, some good elbow grease.
So I think there's a lot of people who are partisan that are being abused. I think that they're willing to push an old narrative even though it's proven to not be productive anymore. Even though it's proven to be diminishing return election after election after election. Voting for the lesser of the evil, as long as it's not that other guy, has failed us, and the choices have gotten worse over the last at least 40 years.
Well, if you just think about it, it's still a step down.
Right. So to go back to the idea of like,
step down.
Some people are nervy, some people feel the heart, some people are smart, and some people are the opposing thumb that helps us get a grip on things. And we can't always be all parts of the body. Yeah. Like, I have friends of mine that are totally the thumb. I go to them because they help me get a grip on things.
Aww.
They know how to like bind an idea into a way where I feel like I can grasp it.
Yeah.
And I like that thumb person. I like the brain people that think of all the stuff that I don't necessarily know how to get into my grasp. I like the people who just want to walk, who just want to move forward. That's how the ideas move forward. And so rather than saying the brain is better than the feet, because look how dirty the feet is, the brain doesn't go anywhere without the feet. The nervy things don't function without the brain. The heart gives us an idea on whether this is a healthy thing to do or not a healthy thing to do for
the oxygen.
Right. So rather than looking at it as a hierarchical thing and the elite as being something better, I think maybe we just need to come up with new terms.
Yeah.
The CPU. Maybe we need to talk to the central processing units of our species.
Yeah.
That are really crunching the data in a way that we can then run that program.
Right, because elite is a ranked term. Elite implies that non-elite.
Right.
And that makes it as if it is a better thing. It's not the correct word if you want to live in a society where all men are created equal, and therefore all roles and passions are equal. They're just different.
Well, I think it's problematic when you live in a monotheistic, black and white, Judeo-Christian based culture.
How so?
Because that's hierarchical.
God, pastor,
right.
Husband, wife, and children.
So like for me, like I don't mind. I know that I am the superior to a number of people in a limited number of fields, but I also know that I have many, many superiors in other fields, and it doesn't mean because I'm superior in this that I am superior. I think we need to use these languages because I want to find the people that are superior thinkers. I want to find the people who have superior ideas that we might be able to implement. And I think maybe it's just about changing. I don't know if anybody out there has an idea. How do we find our authorities, people who are authors and who are doing the work to give us the tools to improve our quality of life and our systems of societal management? How do we find those people? What other terms should we use than the elite? Or because I don't always think it is like somebody who has a degree that has the better idea than somebody who doesn't have a degree. I mean, we're constantly.
We know that that's not the case.
We know that's not the case.
Not everybody who has a degree is a more functional member of society than people that don't have degrees.
Right. So
but we're sold that line.
Part of the idea of finding good authorities, finding good people who have good information is made problematic by being bound in a black and white monotheistic zeitgeist that we live in generally. So the idea of preaching to the choir, that was a phase that was fun. Then the idea of sort of challenging the rot within your own house, which I sort of tried to do societally, politically, was not as fun.
Right.
It was fun, but didn't seem very productive to try to. There's preaching to the choir, and then they're saying, hey, wait, maybe we could refine our methods and have a better sound, and getting a lot of negative response to trying to improve the circle. So now I feel like I want to move somewhere else and narrow the circle.
I mean, you had a bit of a down day, the day that Bernie suspended his campaign.
Yeah, that was disappointing. You want to talk about that in your research sense and what you've come to? Well,
I mean, I can get around to why you should keep voting for Bernie in the primaries if you want him. But I was more talking about how you've kind of come to this new level for your mission on Post-Orthodoxy, your idea of coalescing and distilling who we have most of our conversations with because of all the aggression from people who ironically say you can't hear anybody else's opinion but your own, and don't like the things that you're saying about the Democratic Party or about religion.
I'm not happy with the status quo.
And that if we're going to actually start changing things, we do have to criticize and deconstruct and reconstruct everything, even mom and dad.
All that.
So
who's got time for that?
Not very many people.
I guess I'm making time for that.
Yeah.
We're making time for that.
We choose to spend a large portion of our time educating, researching, philosophizing, networking with other brains, reading articles, reading books, having Skype calls with philosophers from Sweden or Germany.
Or
Canada.
Right. So I'm looking at people that are out there doing work. I've been interested in the meta-modernist and Hansi Freinacht. I'm also going sideways from them. Hansi is friends with Joschka Rohr, who has founded an organization called the Co-Creation Foundation, which is trying to implement the exact same things that we're talking about. He comes from a background similar to mine, which was about sustainability, farming. How do we get the roots dealt with first? How are we eating good food?
If the tree isn't bearing good fruit, don't just start chopping off branches. Like there's something systemic that needs to be improved, something in the environment that needs to be improved.
So Joschka has moved on into this Co-Creation Foundation, which I found. I have to go back and find that their page because I think they're doing some really interesting work in terms of what I think is important, which is building parallel institutions. So I don't think everybody's super hot on what's going on with our federal government in this crisis. I don't think everybody's super pleased with the medical industry as a whole, not the workers, not the nurses, not the doctors, but the medical industry as a whole in handling what we're dealing with.
And yet, many people's reactions is just to bunker down and get through this next thing, quote unquote.
Right. So we're I'm exploring other people who are exploring, and not just exploring, but actually putting boots on the ground um, movements to find uh, explore options and try to put options into play that are better than what we've been doing. The battle against the status quo is real, and that's why we're doing this. This is not preaching to the choir. This is not. If I say bad things about Trump, that gives you a partisan catnip hit that you'll just keep watching me because you like to hear me say bad things about
Right.
Trump. We're not that show.
We would have more followers if we said more bad things about Trump or
Right.
Republicans.
I often bag on the Democratic establishment because I feel like that is the only viable opposition at this present moment in the zeitgeist against. I don't spend a lot of times breaking down how painful the Republican establishment is because I figure it's that's a sort of understood.
Amongst the people we generally talk to, the powers that be in the Republican group, we already know we don't really like them. We already know we don't really like the elite in the Republican groups.
So I'm not going to be going blue no matter who. So we're also not getting a bunch of blue partisan catnip people who are coming in to say, "Yay, you're on the team."
Let's just get behind the team.
So we've chosen a lesser path, a smaller path, a more refined path here, and not looking to have the widest possible audience. We're looking for folks who are sharing information that is productive. Yeah.
It's hard for me because I do kind of just want to talk to everybody. I have to remind myself, like, if we were actually sitting down over coffee, we would be able to have a great conversation.
Right.
But if you get 50 people in a conference room, you're not going to be able to have the same level of conversation as if you have 10 people in a conference room, for instance, as a metaphor, perhaps.
So I just posted a link to the Co-Creation Foundation, their About Us page.
Oh, that's fantastic. It was so much fun.
Because to give you an idea, they're just building this team. They're building this team. And team with titles like Impact Wizard, Multimedia Storyteller, Wordsmith, Wonder Boy, Shape Translator, Democracy Revolutionary, Expert for Creation and Transformation.
Now I don't feel quite so weird about mimetic mediator and psychic doula.
Right. Change maker. Paul Paxmajer is a change maker.
That's right.
Sustainable governments, landscape architect, serial entrepreneur, and bridge builder. That means she's had a few failed businesses, but God bless her, because that's how you learn stuff.
Yeah.
Philosopher and philanthropist. So there's a really interesting gathering of folks, and we're looking to do the same thing here, but sort of on Facebook to share information, because I know a lot of people who are constantly finding information in my newsfeed that I rely on, because I like their the quality of information that they're putting out. I'm always looking for post-partisan stuff or non-partisan stuff because I think the partisan rancor is really kind of makes me want to vomit. I'm kind of over it at this
Rather
point.
than us all fighting each other, how about we figure out who's causing the problems and talk about that?
Where's the real enemy, right?
Because we're doing a lot of lateral fighting, a lot of horizontal fighting, and we should be doing some vertical revolution instead.
So I posted a link to the Co-Creation Foundation because I think for folks that are interested in our show, you might be interested in what they're doing. I'm interested in what they're doing. We're hoping, I did have a Zoom session with Joshka, the founder of that organization, last summer. And we're looking forward to having an interview with him soon. We're still figuring out our capacities for having quality audio to have interviews with people to share in our live stream.
We like to do live interviews.
We're working on that.
So that everybody can participate, but it's complicated.
So we're looking for people to interview. We're looking for people, we're looking for brains to pick.
What articles do you read all the time?
Yeah.
What websites do you keep an eye on? Who do you follow on Facebook and Instagram? Who are the influencers? When you want to know what's really going on out there, where do you go? And
please don't say MSNBC or Fox.
Well,
I'm kind of over those. Those are not reputable sources.
Outside of the big four.
Yes.
where do you go for your news? Dark reads Heather Cox Richardson on Facebook.
She's heavily left biased.
She writes a
historically,
super historically informed essay every day about current events.
Right.
So you can, if you're interested in something Heather Cox Richardson talks about, you can go and Google those terms.
Yeah. So I like her because she's obviously left. Like,
you like her because she's
progressive
left?
or left? No, she's obviously out progressive left.
Mm-hmm.
She's not post-partisan.
Mm-hmm.
I do like the work that she does into combing through the news and compiling it into a story.
Right.
I like what she's doing there. I don't necessarily agree with the angle that she's coming from, but I really appreciate the work that she puts in to amassing the day's news and putting it into a small letter. And I have the discernment enough to sort of understand where her bias is.
Right.
And still appreciate what she's doing.
You say you discern about a bias of somebody that's sort of on your team?
Yeah, there's bias. There's lots of bias.
You don't just listen to everything she said and eat it up because it's the things that you want to hear?
Well, that's the thing. It's not always the things I want to hear. What I appreciate about her post is that she's a historian.
Yeah.
So she's taking things that are happening now and looking at other historical moments where these things have happened, precedents. It also makes the novelty of the current event not so novel. Mm-hmm. We've been here before. So yeah, I am loath to just endorse somebody's perspective because it is the color blue, especially in this primary season that we're in. Gilbert said, politics is about ideas, and identifying as a Republican or a Democrat isn't an idea. Those are identities. And that, yes, is exactly the problem.
Amen, yes. And anything you identify as, you can be led around by the nose. Right.
I was an identity politics person, being raised fundamentalist right-wing Christian, and so if you said anything about Reagan, you were actually talking about my mama or my dad.
Right.
Or my family,
How dare
or my
you say
town.
Anything bad.
So you don't know, when you are in identity politics, you don't know how to separate healthy critique from personal attack. And I find that very difficult in moving things forward. So
Greg Henley says, in my opinion, I think most politicians care more about money than common people.
Well, unfortunately, I think that's a part of the job description now.
Yeah.
There was a great series, I have to remember the name of it. There's a great series of short little 10-minute videos of following these new Congress people who went to Congress. Like, some of them were in the Tea Party revolution, so that they weren't like steeped in politics. They were just a part of the revolution, came in and realized that their job is to be at their desk calling up rich people to fund their next campaign. Mm-hmm. And that was the vast majority of the work that they were doing as a representative. So it's not, that's more than thinking that. Unfortunately, I'm afraid that's
sort of categorically
the job
true.
description. Right.
The more potential power you have as a politician, the more people with money are going to try to influence you to use that power for their benefit over the citizens' benefit.
So I'm tired of trying to have conversations with people about, are our politicians corrupt?
Right, because some people...
Nope, it's only the Republicans that are corrupt.
Yeah.
Nope, it's only the Democrats that are corrupt. Like that, I'm done with that conversation. We're not having that conversation anymore. That's why I would like folks like you to populate our Post-Orthodoxy Facebook page, because I would prefer to spend time on there talking with people who are outside of the partisanship bubble, or at least exploring outside the partisanship bubble,
right,
to start having conversations where I don't have to apologize to somebody for talking about the DNC.
Right.
The DNC is not a person. The DNC is not a Democrat.
It's a corporation.
It's a corporation. And if I say something about the DNC, people act like I talked about their grandma, and that's not what I'm doing.
We can't do anything productive.
I'm tired of having that conversation.
Yeah.
So, anyway, that's me ranting.
So we're basically deciding, we're distilling.
Yes. I have a lot of really smart, wonderful people in my feed.
Yeah. And it's not like we don't want to keep interacting with folks and having conversations, but if we have the exact same conversation over and over and over again, and we can't ever get past square one because you keep asking us why we don't say bad things about the GOP, we're probably not going to have as many of those conversations.
Right. Gilbert said Richardson's bias doesn't bother him. If she tried to hide her bias, it she wouldn't seem honest. And I totally agree. I have bias.
Yeah.
That's what I say on the show. I have total bias.
We don't
I'm
pretend
open
to be neutral.
I'm open to having my bias altered towards a more healthy, sane direction. This is why we're doing this. I want my bias calibrated with new information and new possibilities as we move forward. So I definitely have bias, but I just want to be upfront about it, and I like to identify other people's biases, so at least I know how to receive the information.
I'm sure there's an epic fantasy metaphor for this whole shift. You know, it's not. I definitely always wish that I could just talk to everybody and just be productive that way, but I think, like Dark said, all men are created equal, but everybody has different jobs, and some people's jobs are just to finish college or raise their kids or make it to retirement, not necessarily spend hours every day networking, reading, and philosophizing for a new society. And there's no judgment around either of those roles or passions. I have to use my energy in a way that's going to be productive for everyone. The hope is that we can network more with people who are willing to go beyond step one and level up, and maybe it's the knight's quest, rather than staying in the village and helping the village build barns and raise sheep and do all of those essential functions. We're questing out beyond the village to go and slay some dragons. And not every villager is going to be a dragon slayer, and not every person is going to be someone who is able to shear a sheep properly. And that's okay.
Gilbert, can you read
Mark French?
Mark French's thing?
Economics, Mark Blythe.
I think it means
Economist Mark Blythe, Richard Wolff, Michael Hudson, somebody from India, the Watson Institute at Brown University, Piketty at Stanford. We live in the current result of the total victory of the Chicago Boys and Milton Friedman, which is just the continuation of Austrian and Bocconi school economics. Every economic truth teller right now is treated as a dissenter by mainstream media, and our political stresses are being caused by inequality and the lack of economic access. AKA, most U.S. citizens are super poor, and if you don't think most U.S. citizens are super poor, then you are out of touch with what's happening in your country. And I'm not saying that with judgment. It's just the way things are. Most U.S. citizens are super poor, and there are financial power structures running the planet, and all of the countries are like departments in a department store.
Mark is talking about the Chicago School of Economics. Mm-hmm. It's a model of economics, which briefly defined is a neoclassical economic school of thought that originated at the University of Chicago in the 1930s. The main tenets of the Chicago School are that free markets best allocate resources in an economy, and that minimal or even no government intervention is best for economic prosperity. So we are living in this model of the 1930s.
Okay.
That's the defining economic model. That is what's behind capitalist free market thought, is the Chicago School of Economics. So
gotcha.
This is the elephant in the room that we don't talk about. How often have you heard the term Chicago School of Economics?
Never.
That's not a common
But I'd
thing
also
that people
never
talk
heard
about.
of Black Deck or whatever it was until a couple weeks ago.
BlackRock?
BlackRock.
Yes.
Like one of the major financial groups running the planet, BlackRock.
Right.
These things are Googleable.
Mark French, he goes on. He says, every economic truth teller right now is treated as a dissenter by mainstream media, and our political stresses are being caused by inequality and the lack of economic access. It says personal greed and market efficiency solves all. Ayn Rand is what it looks like philosophically.
So as far as
the Randroids, The
Randroids?
Yes, Ayn Rand. The Randroids. That's what Robert Anton Wilson called them. The Randroids have
like
taken...
Bernie Bros, but 150 years ago.
Yeah. The Randroids have taken over our society and our economic system, which is game theory. It's the game theory that you have to get yours before somebody else gets yours.
There's not enough for everyone.
There's not enough for everyone.
And you have to get yours before somebody gets yours.
So this is a model
Lies
that we can get rid of. Speaking of, there is a clip I was going to play, and I think I already went away from it. There was a clip I was going to play about this guy who went on CNN Business. No, it was Fox News Business, and was saying, let the hedge fund companies and let the airlines go bankrupt. Why are we bailing them out? And
because if the airline goes bankrupt, people aren't going to lose their pensions. Because that's what the media makes you scared about, is that if the airline goes bankrupt, then the employees of the airline will lose their retirement packages.
Well, that's what they say.
That's what they say.
Yeah.
But what this guy is saying, who is intimately involved in finances
on a large
finances on a large scale, intimately involved in finances on a large scale, what he's saying is that if the airline goes bankrupt, it would actually just quote unquote hurt the speculators who gamble with airline profits to make more profits.
I don't know which. Just go to there's Truth Out, Common Dreams, or Market Watch. I'm going to go to the Market Watch, even though I haven't read it yet. This is a link to this cat. His name is Klamath Palihapitiya.
Somebody from India.
Founder and chief executive of Social Capital LP. So this cat went on to Fox Business News and said, what we've done is disproportionately prop up poor performing CEOs and boards, and that they don't deserve to be saved.
Because trickle down, that's another big lie of the last 100 years, is that the people at the top need to have money in order for them to be able to give it to the people further down, their employees. The people at the top have money, and then they pay their employees, and then they pay their employees, when in actuality the way the money flows is, if people at the bottom have money, they buy things, and they buy things, and they buy things.
So what I found interesting about that Chamath Palihapitiya, yeah. This cat sort of blew the mind of the Fox News Business Watch guy.
Because he just out and said it.
He used to be a CEO at, was it Facebook?
Yeah.
So this is a guy who
He started Facebook.
He did well.
Facebook.
He did well. He's got some money.
Yeah.
So he's got a venture capital group where the name of it is Social Capital, which I find really interesting because that is part of what attracted me to the meta-modern philosophy, was saying we live in a world where financial capital is not the only capital.
Yeah.
If you have social capital, if you're good with people, if you're good at organizing, if you're good at disseminating information, you have social capital.
Right.
If you're super sexy, you can get people to watch your yoga video, so you have sexual capital. There's different capitals. There's humor capitals. If you can take a terrible situation and make us be able to see it because you make us laugh at ourselves, that's capital. So he has this company called Social Capital. They're not taking new money. They just have enough money.
Okay.
And they're looking at finding avenues to improve the business. So this is somebody who's traded on Wall Street, and he's saying, let these other guys fail. So it feels like there's some kind of coup happening, some sort of consciousness shift in finance, which I don't know anything about and I can't speak to. But this makes me want to understand.
But we can find those people online and read their articles and watch their videos.
Yeah, this makes me want to understand what's going on with this cat and what he's doing.
Cat?
Yeah.
90%. Yeah, I'm looking at a whole bunch of different income breakdown charts in the U.S. I found a really fascinating one that talks about whether or not you think you're rich.
Ah, right.
And it's like do you consider yourself rich? This is how respondents answered to that question. This is like the Dunning-Kruger of finance.
Okay.
Oddly enough. Because the few people who are actually rich is a very, very, very few amount of people. I think a lot of citizens in the U.S. think of themselves as being middle class when you're not actually middle class.
Right.
Like, but if you make $100,000 in a year, it's a 50-50 chance you think of yourself as rich.
50-50.
Yeah.
Ah.
By polls.
Depends on where you live.
Right.
Tulsa is very different than San Francisco for that amount.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Right. So, but for instance, like in San Francisco, if you make under $130,000 a year, you're considered to be in the poverty bracket because of how expensive it is to live in San Francisco. Whereas in Butte, if you're making $30,000 a year, you're going to be flying just fine. If you make $10,000 a year, 75% chance you think of yourself as poor.
Mm.
But I thought that was very interesting that if you're making $100,000 a year, you 56% of people that responded to this quiz poll said that if they're making $100,000 a year, they think of themselves as rich.
Mm.
That's fascinating to me because $100,000 a year is not rich. That's
Right.
low middle class.
Right.
We have a massive poverty base on the pyramid and a very large low middle class base, and then a tiny middle class section and an extremely itty-bitty pinnacle of the pyramid who are actually rich.
Mark French says 44% of Americans make $18,000 a year or less.
Mm-hmm.
So I think even a few years ago, there were some billionaire guys that were, it was a famous trope that went around. Some billionaire guy did a TED talk that said, hey, other billionaires, the pitchforks are going to come. You can't create this much income inequality and be safe.
Right.
Eventually,
people are going to realize how much you're hoarding.
The pain is bad enough that things break.
Yep.
You break the system by exerting way too much pressure on the people on the other side of the income gap. So that becomes, it doesn't matter if you got an extra few $1 million if the system crashes. That millions of dollars means nothing.
Right.
And so this idea of getting outside of the Chicago School of Economics, there's a number of people smarter than me that I'm sure could help me understand. I'm talking about metamodernism, not because I think metamodernism is the way to go. It's just a pool that I've waded into to try to get an understanding of. And I would also like to wade into an economic pool. I would like to find somebody who can tell me an economic model that works, that helps adjust the gap, mm-hmm. the inequality gap. And I don't know if that's just economics. That's also about social, that's about, we fetishized millionaires when I was growing up. Lifestyles of the rich and famous.
50s, 60s, 70s, everybody wanted to be rich.
The idea is that everybody can be rich, and so everybody should be rich. And if you're not rich, you're a schlub.
Right. If you have not enough money, it means you're not working hard enough.
Right. So the idea of fetishizing having a financial feedback loop that creates a spike in money so intense that it starts to harm the environment. That's my perception of it. Once you get $6 billion, what is that? What are you doing with that? Right. And what effect does that have? Some people say, well, they have $6 billion. You could also get $6 billion if you did what they did. I'm not sure what they're doing is healthy.
Yeah,
I'm not sure I want $6 billion.
What's it called? Multimedia marketing? No, what's it called?
Multi-level marketing.
Multi-level marketing.
Ponzi schemes.
Are all those times when your friends just suddenly decide to start selling stick-on nails or books or Tupperware on Facebook, and then that's all. That's what our financial structure is doing on a massive scale, and it only really benefits the people at the top. You buy, and the person at the top has the benefit of all the buying. You know something I would really like to Google and learn for myself and do some research to be responsible about just not saying, well, Mark Zuckerberg has millions of dollars.
Billions, probably.
Right, Mark Zuckerberg has billions of dollars. Why is he hoarding? I don't want to just say stuff like that. I know, I guess in my mind, I theorize, Mark Zuckerberg doesn't have a bank account with billions of dollars in it.
No.
He has assets, and he has
offshore accounts with some money in it.
Well, he has assets and stocks and futures and speculations that if he cashed all of those things in, he could hold in his hands billions of dollars. But I don't think, like, when you say, how can Jeff Bezos, the guy who owns Amazon, have all of that money while people are starving? And I just want to research just to be sure. Are there actually people out there who are literally sitting on money they can't use in a lifetime? Or do we mean that they have it, quote unquote, as in it's invested into a company that they founded?
So since we have the Post-Orthodoxy Facebook page, I'm imploring anybody out there that has a school of economics model that's worth looking into, because I want to look into that.
Yeah.
We have suddenly reached the end of our first hour.
What? Yeah, please share with us some resources for getting to know. This is one of the big things Post-Orthodoxy is about. Have you been buying into the lie that if you don't have enough money, you must not be working hard enough? Because you should relieve yourself of that lie.
I want to take the top of the hour to play this Hansi Freinocht piece.
Fantastic.
And then take a bathroom break while he's doing it.
Okay. I will listen to it while you're away.
Yes, because I've listened to this twice already today. Okay. This is an interview that we did with Hansi Freinocht. He is a philosopher.
Hansi Freinocht, all alone in the Swiss Alps.
Yes, that's Hansi Freinocht, all alone in the Swiss Alps. He called us and we did an interview, and we're taking these little bite-sized pieces out. So this is one of the big things that I wanted to talk about on the show
We're gonna
today.
listen to a little 4 or 5 minute section and then talk about it?
Yeah.
All right.
I'm gonna save the second section. I figure we're just gonna do like 4 minutes, and then we'll come back, address that, and then we can go forward with the next 5 minutes. All right. Here's Hansi Freinocht. Ready?
I'm ready.
Me too.
Box. From the outside, we're looking through it, and we're looking beyond it. We're saying, okay, modern society was not the end of history. There's something after it, or there can be something after it. The world might also kind of crash, but at least there's the potential for a modern society to be more aware of its own culture, more aware of its own basic assumptions about reality, basic assumptions about humanity, and so on. And those basic assumptions can be remade consciously and deliberately as we go on. So it is the moment that society becomes conscious of its own culture and begins to actively and deliberately remake and redesign its own culture, not just running culture as a code, not just as if it were a computer program that runs us. If we can rewrite the program that runs us together, we can talk about it. Like, what are we going to put in our own brains through schools? How are we going to change our social media? How are we going to design our structures of governance? How are we going to support our capability to have loving relationships with one another? If we start answering those questions, we are subtly making the shift from a modern society which takes things for granted, changes in nature, but takes culture for granted, to a meta-modern society which works through and beyond the modern world and redesigns both nature and culture.
So a meta-modernist is not just somebody that criticizes, even intellectually or constructively criticizes and picks apart modern society. A meta-modernist is someone who constructively criticizes and picks apart modern society and then works to actively rebuild and recreate it in a new and better way.
Correct. All according to the meta-modern dictum, after deconstruction, picking things apart, must follow reconstruction, putting them back together in novel ways.
Novel ways.
So that...
Right. I sort of have an image in my head. I've always been a recycler. I'm somebody who always sort of does my art off things I find on the curb. And that's sort of what I perceive that process as. In England, they have a term, they call it a rag and bone man. That's somebody who walks around and picks the dumpster off the top, or the toaster off the dumpster, and then fixes it and then sells it on the same street to somebody else or back to that person. That's sort of what I get an image in my head, is that ability to not necessarily have to harvest new materials to create a new world, but to remake the world from the materials that we've already harvested.
Yeah, I mean, obviously, we sometimes need to produce new material as well.
Sure.
But the very fact that we can structure the worldviews around us and we can support a certain kind of development through those worldviews, and we can coordinate how many different people view the world, so you don't get stuck in partisanship. For instance, the question you asked before we started here, the recording, you said you have been focusing on going beyond the American partisanship, red or blue, and so on. And that in itself is a bit of a meta-modern question, because it's about how do I not get stuck in my own worldview. We're going to have our own preferences and personalities and backgrounds and positions in society and so on, but we have to acknowledge that the other people exist and they have worldviews different than our own. So if we want to coordinate the best of my own worldview with the very real existence of other people who we cannot brainwash or violently force to have other opinions and worldviews than they naturally have, then we have to think about, how do I make the best of the world beyond my own worldview? How do I coordinate this worldview and that one in a bigger schema, in a bigger whole? And that in itself is one of the key meta-modern questions that we're working our way across many worldviews, not just our own.
What do you think about that?
Well, he's talking about a lot of things that post-Orthodoxy is all about, which I think is why metamodernism was so appealing to us when we first started hearing about it. Right. And you were researching metamodernism and following Hansi online before Copacetic Conversations became Post-Orthodoxy. Right. But one of the things that really stuck out to me there is and I'm just going to horribly paraphrase, but the metamodernist, we were like, what is a metamodernist? How would you recognize one on the street? The metamodernist actively seeks to not be entrapped by their own belief systems and perspectives. Not that you don't have belief systems, not that you don't have perspectives, not that you don't choose to see reality one way or another, but that you actively work not to be trapped by them or led by them. Rather than being led by your identity as something, you say, I have chosen to be that thing. Maybe I've chosen to vote Democrat or I've chosen to vote Republican, but that's not my identity, and it doesn't hurt me if somebody else says something bad about it. Right. And if voting Democrat or voting Republican begins to go against my integrity or against my other moral ideals, then I'm going to stop doing it, and it won't hurt me to let go of it either, because it's not part of who I am. Right. The perspectives that you take on and the belief systems that you float through or espouse, whether temporarily or long term, are not cancerously interwoven into your being, but that you are a being independent from belief systems and perspectives that you may wear from time to time like a coat. Whatever is appropriate for the weather. Heavy coats in the wintertime, raincoats in the spring. Right. I want to just put a quick query out to the folks that are listening to this on Facebook on the live stream. Okay. If that audio of our Swiss philosopher is tolerable, if you can hear it while we're doing this, because we have another section to that. I'd like to. Well, what were your thoughts about Hansi's first segment there? Well, I like the idea of. I take it personally because there's a phrase that I coined for one of my art shows a few years ago called cultural composting. In that having run a farm and understanding the value of feces, animal dung, or depending on how crunchy you are, human dung. We'll call it steer manure. We'll just go with steer manure. So steer manure it's a bunch of bull poop. Right? Which in itself is not something that seems all that interesting. But if you pile it up, it heats up,
and it burns off all the pathogens, and it breaks down, and that's where all the new great stuff comes from, is the composting of the BS.
Right.
And
a bunch of BS piled up breaks down, and out of it new stuff can grow.
We have no shortage of cultural BS. And I think this is a moment where that BS sort of piles on itself, and it heats up, and maybe it burns off some of the toxicity, and it becomes fertile ground for new things to come out of, because we've recognized the BS.
Mm-hmm.
I think it's taken a lot for people to recognize the BS that we're in the midst of.
Well, some people are still so much fighting against acknowledging the BS because of that identity problem. Because if I acknowledge that some things have broken down and aren't functioning the way that they're supposed to, maybe it means something bad about me and I should probably be defensive.
Right. BS is also how Robert A. Tom Wilson referred to belief systems.
Oh, gosh.
So we can pile up all our BS. Our belief systems, our societal waste products, old things that died, we can break it down. We can break it down and do something new.
Compost it and build something new. Use it to fertilize the garden of the new society.
Right. Lacey says the audio is pretty good.
Sweet.
We're going to do another segment because I think I want to tie these two together.
Sweet.
So we're going to go back to our interview with Hansi Freinock.
I guess I can't do a bathroom break because I haven't heard the segments yet.
You can do it. I'll just turn it up.
That's okay.
All right.
And that kind of brings us back to your question, Ainsley, about what is a metamodernist. Well, so I give you one answer, let's say the philosophical or political answer. A metamodernist is a person who takes this particular position on society and life. There is another kind of answer, one that is very central to metamodern theory itself, namely the answer that has to do with developmental psychology. So here's how it connects. Okay, so we have many different worldviews. And in the postmodern world, when you're just picking things apart, in the postmodern worldview, when you're just picking things apart, you never really compare them. You never really rank them. You never really put them in a sequence. First, you get to this worldview, and then if that crashes down, you tend to get to this worldview, and if that crashes down, you tend to get to this one. To metamodern thinkers, developmental sequences like that are allowed. They're not viewed as taboo or anything. It's not viewed as elitist or exclusionary or anything like that. It simply makes sense to order worldviews that, some people have a bit more simple worldviews, some others have more complex worldviews, some people have a more profound relationship to spiritual life. Other people have a more shallow relationship to spiritual life. Some people have explored more life experiences. Others have relatively simple life paths which have integrated less material and so on. And there's also a difference between childhood and adulthood. For instance, things we thought were super fun to do when we were little kids just don't seem meaningful when we were adolescents, and the things that seem meaningful to us when we're adolescents don't seem meaningful to us when we're adults. So in all of these examples, you see that there are developmental sequences that, there seems to be certain directions in which development goes. It's not arbitrary. It's not that first you become a 40-year-old, let's say, genius entrepreneur, and then you suddenly become, let's say, a 4-year-old Lego builder or something. That's just not a sequence that happens unless you have a certain accident or anything that damages your brain. So because there are these developmental sequences, and they are empiric, you can study them for real, you can study them with science, you can look at them and they are there, then you get hints about how to order perspectives. The perspectives go from less complex to more complex, and they go from certain arguments that beat other arguments, or one argument that, if you take it far enough, kind of falls on its own feet, and then you start having another kind of worldview. And that's key to the metamodern perspective. It's, it's not, I mean, it's not just that there are a bunch of worldviews out there and then you have to make the best of it. They actually evolve, and they can help each other evolve. And the more evolved worldviews, they tend to be able to include and care about the less evolved worldviews. So there is a directionality not only of knowing ourselves, but there's also a directionality of this evolution or development that goes in the direction of knowing each other and expanding our solidarity to each other. So caring about each other and caring more widely, but also having the capacity of caring more deeply. And then that may change how we organize our lives, or how we organize our companies, or which life goals that we have, or how we answer fundamental questions about the meaning of life, but also how we manage fundamental issues such as, the country is split in a political divide. How do you treat the other side? How do you get people to feel listened to? How do you steelman their arguments, meaning that you give them the best version of their argument, better perhaps than they could have formulated it themselves, so that they feel really seen and heard. That's the general direction we're going in. That, we're going to create a society which helps people to be really, really good at seeing our own emotions, our own drives, our own thoughts, make them transparent to ourselves, and at the same time make people much, much more capable of taking in the perspective of others and not judging those perspectives, but at the same time making evaluations of perspectives and evolving our own perspective, seeing our own perspective as always incomplete and always under development.
The end.
It was nice of him to bring it around to a current events issue for us in the U.S.
For us U.S. folks?
Even though that's not what he's experiencing in Sweden.
Well, there's a...
I'm sure there's political disagreements.
Partisan rancor increasing all over, for
right.
Sure. We just get to be cartoon bad. Like cartoon level bad.
High level. Well, the U.S. is the best at everything, haven't you heard?
Number one.
And number one at infighting amongst the siblings.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So, do you have thoughts on his take on that?
Well, I kind of went on a bit of a rant on our social media list because he talked about using the words better or worse, and instead he's like, it's very hard to talk about how certain philosophies are better than other philosophies, or certain social structures are better than other social structures. Right. And in general, it's smart and logical to try to avoid saying better or worse.
I agree.
And so I listed a bunch of alternatives to better or worse. Instead of saying something is better or worse, or right or wrong, you could say it's accessible or inaccessible, easy or difficult, effective or ineffective, healthy or unhealthy. You can even say something is correct or incorrect.
Or incorrect.
The problem is that better versus worse and right versus wrong are extremely subjective.
Are you trying to school a Swiss philosopher?
Oh, no, I'm agreeing with him.
Oh.
No, that was me. That was me agreeing with him.
Yes. I think those terms are really important.
Yeah.
I think using different terms changes the way, especially when people are identified with their political stance, to say you're wrong is different than saying maybe there's a healthier way to do that.
Right. Well, and somebody might align with a particular candidate, and instead of saying you're wrong for liking that candidate, I can say I've looked at that candidate's behavior and I think it's unhealthy behavior. And then you're taking it away from your friend, you're taking it away from talking.
Yes.
Yeah. And so much like doing my best to use positive language rather than doing my best to cut out negative language.
Right.
I do my best to use positive words.
Uh-huh.
I also, since meeting you, do my best to avoid using war terms.
It's a real thing. It's a battle.
LOL. I also, since moving beyond strict evangelicalism, have done my best to acknowledge and integrate the extreme subjectivity of right and wrong and use more accurate terminology. Such
more
as,
nuanced,
and more
yes.
accurate.
Yeah.
Because right and wrong are super blanket terms. It's like calling something beautiful.
Yeah, it's subjective.
You can call something intricate.
Yes.
You can call something complex.
Yes.
You can call something, you can say it's soothing, but it might be soothing to you and disturbing to someone else.
Right.
It might be beautiful to you and freakish to someone else. And so trying to use language that is more objectively accurate.
So the show Post-Orthodoxy.
But also, okay, go ahead.
No, you do it.
No, but also as far as what Hansi was saying about bubbles, about being a young person, being a young like that was something that I said to myself when I was 12 and 15 and 17 and 20 and 25 is I was never going to forget what it was like to be young, because your bubble is so small when you're young and it feels enormous. From the outside, the bubble that a child is living in seems like a very small bubble. They're not worried about rent. They're probably not worried about whether or not they're going to put food on the table tonight, because that's your job as the adult. They're not worried about that stupid thing you said in high school because they're only 7.
Right.
But to them, their world is enormous. The bubble that they live in as a child, as a 7-year-old, is enormous. And having the grace to respect other people's bubbles, such as when you tell your child they can't go to church in mismatched socks, that is a huge deal to them, because it was one of the most important decisions of their morning.
Yes.
Your most important decision of the morning is whether or not the baby with a fever should stay home, thus making one parent stay home, breaking up the family unit, or should you go to church with the baby with a fever and just not let anybody hold it. But for your 7-year-old, picking those socks was the most important decision in their bubble. And the more we can learn to respect each other's bubbles, even if they seem really small to us, the better time we'll have and the more productive conversations we'll have.
That makes me feel bad about the way that I've treated some Biden supporters.
Good.
Not that bad, though.
I mean, I think...
It's a moment of reflection.
I don't mean good in a... Can you stop doing that?
Yes.
Just for the sake of recording?
Yes.
Sorry. I don't mean good that you feel badly in a mean way.
Mm-hmm.
I mean good as in it's important to evaluate the symptoms of your behavior and make yourself healthier.
I hear you. His call has sort of been, it's hard. It's not always an easy thing to manage for me. The call to civility across big borders. The idea is yes, but I think for myself a certain fatigue sets in on trying to be diplomatic.
For sure.
At one point, I just went to lash out and call people morons.
And
I try to avoid that.
Which is why I think it's important for us to distill our conversations into smaller, more productive groups where there's less fighting about stuff that you feel we shouldn't be fighting about anymore. We should move beyond fighting about this. It's hard for me to not, we talk about privilege a lot. A lot of people have privilege that they don't think that they have.
Right.
Or abundance versus scarcity.
Okay.
And if you happen to be the 30-year-old parent of a 7-year-old, you have the abundance and the privilege of having a broader worldview and a bigger reality bubble than the 7-year-old does. And with great privilege comes great responsibility. If you have the privilege of being the 30-year-old to the 7-year-old parent, then you also have the responsibility of respecting and being kind about their reality bubble and not making them wrong for being sad they can't wear mismatched socks.
We have a lot of adults who are parents who are in ego battles with their children.
Because they think of their children as having all the same tools and perceptions that they do, and so why is my child fighting me all the time?
Gilbert said, Hansi talked about making sure people you disagree with know that they're being understood.
Yes.
And it is such an important...
I'm not just shutting you down.
No, not just waiting for you to shut up so you can trounce on them with the better information.
To actually listen rather
than to know that you're being heard.
Rather than to listen just so that I can come up with what I want to say about what you're saying.
I know that's what delivered me from identity politics and identity religion was people seemed to be genuinely curious why I held those perspectives. It wasn't the people that said, you're an idiot for thinking that way, this is the right way that did it. It was people saying, wow, you seem like such an intelligent person. I'm really curious how you came to have this perception
Right.
or this perspective.
Why
And
do
then
you think that way?
And then I would have to ask myself that question.
Why
and
do
then
I
would
think
and
that
then
way?
that would sometimes go way beyond that conversation. That might be a month-long journey for me to understand why I feel that way. And that's how I change my mind.
And do you really feel that way, or was that way of thinking given to you?
Imposed.
And you
right.
just rolled with it for years?
These are the questions I had to ask myself after other people asked them of me and didn't just tell me I was dumb and wrong.
Yep. Well, you're wrong.
And we do a lot of that because it feels good to say, you're dumb and you're wrong, I'm smart and you're not. And I don't feel like that's very productive. It hasn't been very productive when I've done it with other people.
To call them a moron?
Yes.
No.
And it hasn't been very productive when people do it for me. I don't listen to them anymore when they say you're an idiot. I just don't
I don't think hardly
listen to them anymore.
I have met a few people who do keep listening to someone even when that person is lashing out at them and belittling them. But very few people do. And I'll tell you what, right now, kids are way heckin' smart. And they so know when you're belittling them. And they will so stop listening.
Right. That's a big part of our political problem, I think, in our country, is it's generational. The establishment parties are always doubling down on the old folks with the landlines, and there's not a lot of new voters being attracted as could be because they made the process so unattractive. They've made the level of dialogue so low that for me, it feels a little greasy to get involved in politics. It feels a little like the best metaphor is that the fat cats have gotten in the sandbox where you're supposed to build castles, and they've left little treats for you everywhere. So you don't want to get in there and build castles.
Yeah.
You don't want to get into politics and roll up your sleeves and do something because the fat cats have pooped all over it.
Yeah.
And it doesn't.
Everywhere the fat cats.
Well, it's this sort of. The fat cats are the people who define the narrative, and the narrative is a continuation. So we have a new situation right now politically. We have a new situation societally. We have a new situation medically. And people, the fat cats, the people who are defining narratives for something like the Democratic National Committee, are not facile enough to say, you're right, let's move this stuff aside and have a new dialogue and figure out how to enact some change that's good for people. They can't do it. They're too busy like propping their candidate up and shoving him, telling you you're a jerk for not supporting them. That doesn't address our situation. And our old system of politics, I call them fat cats just because I like the cat poop analogy, but it's really establishment folks that are so steeped in a narrative that they cannot change to embrace a new, more relevant, more productive narrative. And the cat poop is basically these narratives.
Some civilians are also so steeped that they can't change, but we're not as motivated or tied down by finances as the people at the top that Dark's talking about. We don't have a bunch of people bribing us to do certain things. We can change our minds.
Right. I'm not.
So how does that tie back into Hansi's concept of not making people wrong if they live in a smaller reality bubble than you do?
So I liked the idea of, because people reached across the divide to talk to me, or I had to go part way. You know, we talk about post-Orthodoxy being an outpost in the borderlands. I had to leave a reality and found myself in the wilds of the rest of the culture that was not conservative, that was not Republican, that was not fundamentalist, that was not white supremacist, that was not misogynistic. I didn't necessarily identify with all that stuff, but that was the world that I came from. And now I'm in a world where I'm dealing with people who use terms like co-op and organic and have tea for breakfast and not coffee. It was bewildering. And they looked at me kindly and said, why do you feel the way you feel? And why do you do what you do? And that is the thing that I feel I would like to return to people who are also in the borderlands. It's difficult to take that tack with people who are not in the borderlands but are still in the home camp and are not looking to change. And that's the folly that I made, was that maybe I know a better way than you do. Would you like to hear it? And then I get, a big F you. So that's why I feel like narrowing the search parameters for people to have conversations with to people who are not stuck in bubbles, who are not stuck in partisanship, who are not stuck in a black and white world, a my way or the highway world. The idea of getting somebody to the point where they want to leave the tribe is a very different thing than having conversations with people who have left a tribe and don't know how to speak other languages yet, don't know how to, are not familiar with other narratives yet. So rather than trying to cram stuff down their throats, it's basically creating a space where dialogues can happen that aren't prescriptive. And I think that's the division between talking to partisans and talking to people who are actually, like myself, looking for maybe better solutions, better options, better narratives, better storylines, things that I feel better about supporting versus holding my nose and doing the thing because it's the socially accepted way to do it and you're a bad guy if you don't do it. Like, enough people are tired of holding their noses.
Yeah.
And I think there's a small, exhausted audience that's looking for better options. That's why I think his prescription to make sure people are heard is just a general good prescription, but I think it's more applicable to some groups than others.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And even though with great privilege comes great responsibility, if you feel that you have a freer mind, if you feel that you have a more liberated mind, if you feel that you have more personal sovereignty, if you feel that you have a broader perspective on the world, if you feel that you have an abundance of education or philosophy or study, you do have, I would say, that person has a responsibility to be kind and compassionate to people that don't have those abundances for whatever reason. But even though you do, I think, have the directive to be compassionate to people that don't have the abundances or the freedoms that you have, that doesn't mean that you need to spend all of your time in the trenches with them.
Agreed.
Some people, and we've all had these experiences, whether it's trying to help a friend out of an abusive relationship or trying to help someone that we know who's struggling with homelessness or drug abuse, sometimes your help is effective and sometimes your help is not.
We talked a lot about Trump trauma, and I feel like that's something that I feel like I don't know how to take on directly. People who are so traumatized by Trump.
Traumatized is another word
People
that
who are
people
so
don't like being
traumatized.
told they are.
Right.
I don't want to be told that I'm brainwashed. I don't want to be told that I'm
traumatized
closed-minded.
or traumatized.
Yeah.
So people who are acting out of trauma,
because that meant somebody else had power over me, and nobody likes to think that.
Don't know that they're always acting out of trauma.
Right.
And so when we have a situation where you have a game show host that becomes president, a narcissist that becomes president, that's not even hiding the narcissism, and people are upset about that and terrified by what that means, it's hard to have a rational. It's not easy to talk about the long game with people who are traumatized by the thing that's right in front of their face. And part of that trauma is not accepting where you are, not fully accepting that guy's the president.
Right. I don't like it. I don't want it to be that way, so I'm just going to be traumatized by it for 4 years.
So I'm just going to throw the next thing at that space.
I'm just going to be mad about that being the way that it is.
So I guess that's another thing that I've grown tired of is that I have compassion for people who are traumatized by Trump.
Mm-hmm.
I don't want to try to. I've run out of steam to try to talk them down from the trauma.
Not everybody can be talked down from their trauma.
Yeah.
And maybe your energy and your efforts can be used more productively somewhere else.
That's what I'm thinking.
That will end up benefiting the traumatized person in the end.
That's the thing.
You know?
I feel that way. So.
It's just so easy to focus on one particular person, you know? It's easier to focus on Trump being the bad guy. It's easier to focus on helping that one homeless person in your neighborhood than in campaigning with your city council to put up a homeless shelter.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And we're all pretty tired, and we're all pretty worn out, and not very many people have enough. And we tend to focus on things that we can fit into our schedule, and that's perfectly fine. Not everybody has the time or the energy to campaign with their city council to put up a homeless shelter. Not everybody thinks that that's the right answer to homelessness.
Right. some people, and homelessness is a regional question. Like, the homelessness in Montana is a very different thing than homelessness in Los Angeles. I know when I lived in Hawaii, there were people who were happy to be homeless. They were happy not to have a house because they didn't have the responsibilities of a house. They were happy not to have a car because they didn't have to hustle for a car.
You can camp year round.
They could just hang out on the beach and figure it out. They could throw a line in the water and pull in a fish. Yeah. Like, I knew people who were happy to be homeless.
It wouldn't have been called homelessness 1,000 years
houseless.
ago. Yeah, houseless.
Versus being homeless.
Yes.
Folks around here can't survive being houseless.
Right.
So you kind of got to have a house to survive the winter.
Mm-hmm.
So the dialogues are different around.
But just because somebody is houseless doesn't mean they're homeless. I think homelessness is a derogatory term. Unfortunately, like somebody living out of a tiny house that they built into their 15-passenger van is considered homeless. But that person isn't homeless; they're just houseless. I want to talk about an article that I saw that I haven't had time to read, and we're not going to talk about it this week, but I want to add that into the roster of things we talk about coming up that I was not aware of. There are many things I was not aware of. I was not aware that North America was entirely populated, settled, and inhabited with people before the Europeans came in and started taking the land and killing people.
Now, you're going to have to slow down because a lot of people are not going to believe what you just said. It's a lot for people.
North America was fully inhabited with millions and millions and millions of people when Europeans showed up and killed those people and took their land. Like, it's not like they killed some people in some spots and took some land. Like, all the land was inhabited with tribal nation states. Millions and millions of people.
500 different nations?
I didn't know that. I also didn't know that the nuclear family was pushed in U.S. social structures as a control mechanism of African Americans. Had you heard that?
Say it again.
The nuclear family structure, mom and dad with their children in one house. Yeah. That is the home. Yeah. The home is that house with just that immediate family.
The nuclear family structure, yeah.
Was pushed in U.S. society as a way of regulating African American neighborhoods.
Huh? I don't know if
because African Americans lived tribally way more recently than white U.S. citizens. And continued to attempt to live. I mean, that's like that. If you want to flip the perspective a little bit, that's what a gang neighborhood is.
Right. When I lived in Los Angeles, the gangs were the police as well as the gangs.
It's its own tribe, but we're calling it a gang because we think in terms of cities, neighborhoods, and nuclear family houses. And so I really want to read that article again and talk about. Like it takes a village. We all say, oh, well, it takes a village to raise a child, but we don't have villages anymore. Mm-mm. We don't have villages. Nobody has support. The old people go and live in little old people homes all by themselves because their children are still raising children all alone with no help and don't have time to take care of the old people.
That's nuclear family fallout.
Nuclear family fallout. That's got to be our next sticker. Oh, I love it. Woo! Speaking of stickers. We sent our first sticker design away that his daughter Zoe made for us.
I just posted a link to our podcast page, so we are starting to populate our podcast page with episode 1 forward. While we're doing 2 shows a week, we're also trying to bring in a couple of old shows to get our podcast page current, so that we can do a show, produce it, and have it on the podcast page.
Mm-hmm. And let you know about it on our Instagram.
We're trying to make it easy for you to find our library. So I just posted a link in the comments of our Facebook feed here, and the cover, the banner image is my daughter Zoe's artwork. We commissioned her to do our
nuclear family fallout.
Our sticker. We're gonna have Post-Orthodoxy stickers
for patrons.
Yeah.
Red Rich Blue, who is not either of our friends but has been in the live stream today.
He's my friend.
He is your friend?
Yeah.
Okay, cool. I've been seeing his comments.
Nevada City, Northern Cali, representing.
That's so cool. Manifest destiny occurred across the globe. What is manifest destiny? I've heard that term.
Oh, that the good Christian folks get to wipe everybody else out because God.
How would the good Christian folks describe manifest destiny?
Well, let's look it up.
Because I feel like you just described manifest destiny as a person who's on the outside of believing in manifest destiny.
No, I think that was on their charter. No.
Like, is it like
the 19th century doctrine or belief that the expansion of the U.S. throughout the American continents was both justified and inevitable
because
our superiority.
Say that one more time.
The 19th century doctrine or belief that the expansion of the U.S. throughout the American continents was both justified and inevitable.
Empire.
Yeah. It says, what are the three parts of manifest destiny? There are three basic themes to manifest destiny. The special virtues of the American people and their institutions, super special. The mission of the United States to redeem and remake the West in the image of agrarian America, and an irresistible destiny to accomplish this essential duty.
Destiny.
It's our job.
To spread special U.S. farm life all over the Americas.
That was the story.
And when was Mark French said that it passed by one vote? Barf.
I guess that's when votes counted.
Is that what makes it okay for us to go and rearrange other countries' governments so that they keep giving us oil?
It's a continuation of that.
Right, I see.
It's a continuation of, like, we got away with that. What else can we get away with?
Boy.
See all the wars in the Middle East.
Right.
Not exactly agrarian, but boy, we need that oil for our tractors.
Well, the poppy fields are agrarian.
Yeah.
I guess.
Yeah.
And the rubber trees in the Koreas are agrarian.
Yeah, bananas.
Yeah.
Banana republics.
Whew. Anyway, I want to read that article about glorifying the solitary nuclear family unit as the best, most important thing. And if you happen to be a single parent or an older sibling raising younger siblings, you don't really meet the utopian ideal of what a family is supposed to be. This sad story about second time around parenting that people talk about grandparents raising their grandkids when they've already raised their own kids, and that's sad. And unfortunately, the situations that lead to that happening are often difficult and sad situations. However, family didn't used to mean mom, dad, and immediate children in one house together, except for Easter and Christmas. Family used to be built around each other, and our foreign correspondent Mokai could speak to this more, because in South Africa, people still live that way. You get married, and your family builds a house for you in your neighborhood with your family, and then your young wife starts having kids, and she gets support and information from the older wives and the grandmas.
Mm-hmm. Redbridge Blue said that definition has been used forever. Look at I think he means Crusades.
Yeah.
And the Crusades were basically a Christian-Muslim war.
Right.
And you could look...
for the Silk Road, right?
Sure.
Weren't we fighting over the Silk Road?
We were fighting over God and Jesus.
Right.
And business.
Right. I mean, what I was raised
you can look at the Middle East wars as an extension of the Crusades still, because we still use the Muslim Christian thing
right
as a justification to go steal oil, to go liberate resources. To go liberate resources.
What's vituperative? I need to look that up. Yep. Guys, this is what we do on Post-Orthodoxy. It's okay to not know the words that everybody uses. I don't think badly about myself when I don't know what somebody's talking about. I say, I don't know what you're talking about. Can you try and say that a different way? Vituperative, bitter and abusive.
Yes.
Mark Twain was a bitter and abusive critic contemporaneously to Manifest Destiny.
Yes.
He was like, Manifest Destiny is bad. Gilbert Gidroy says Napoleon paid for an army with the $15 million Jefferson gave him for the Louisiana Purchase.
Yeah.
I didn't know we bought the Louisiana Purchase from Napoleon.
Maybe we didn't write the check to him directly, but it was the French.
Right, because French and Indian Wars.
Right.
I get it. My education in history is so particulated. It's so portioned out into
it was a lot of propaganda.
various perspectives. And the perspective is that white Christians are the best. And then Christians of other skin colors are the best. And then everybody who's not a Christian is a problem.
So yeah, it's always nice to know what you don't know. And then it's a little daunting to know that you have work to do to fully know it and not just hear about it.
Right. To be okay that I was brainwashed for a while.
I had the fortune of having enough downtime to get through Howard Zinn's A People's History of the United States, which shows it from a U.S. history from a different perspective, not from the empire perspective or from the propaganda perspective or from the business perspective. It talks about the rise of populism. It talks about the part that you didn't know about, which was that there were folks here before the Puritans showed up.
The continent was already inhabited and settled.
Right.
Fully inhabited.
I really enjoy that book.
We didn't discover America.
Yeah.
Mark French also says Stephen Kinzer, Kinzer, is the foremost historian on manifest destiny. I have a lot of reading to do. When am I going to fit it in?
Well, bite-sized pieces, little chunks at a time.
Gosh.
I'm glad that we've had everybody chiming in. It's nice to have feedback. It's nice to have people engaging with the dialogue. Because frankly, we only plan about an hour's worth of stuff, so you guys are helpful in filling the other hour. We've only got about a few minutes left in the show.
Yeah. Do you feel like we've covered your cultural composting and the catch-22 of the Dunning-Kruger effect?
Well, that's the catch. I just like the phrase, the catch-22 of the Dunning-Kruger effect, because I like both those things. And the idea,
catch-22s and Dunning-Kruger.
Well, the idea of the Dunning-Kruger effect is that people who should come forward don't come forward. The people who do come forward are not necessarily the best ones for the job.
Yeah.
And so
maybe the loudest person in the room isn't necessarily the wisest or the smartest.
Part of me wants to be the loudest person in the room because I want change. Yeah. I want to move things forward, and then I feel like I might be the bad side of Dunning-Kruger.
Maybe.
So it's kind of a catch-22.
Well, but isn't it more like if you're worried about being rude, you're probably not being rude.
Okay. If you think you're crazy, you're probably not.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's the Dunning-Kruger is specifically saying if you're not doubting yourself, you're probably not as hot as you think you are. If you're not doubting yourself, right. If you're a person that doesn't doubt themselves, then you probably aren't such hot stuff.
Right.
But if you are one of those people that does doubt themselves or question or have confidence, like wonder if they're the best person for the job, then it's far more likely.
If you're not a vituperative critic of yourself?
I don't think you have to be self-abusing. I just mean the fact that you're worried about being crazy.
I'm just trying to use that again. I'm trying to find an opportunity because I want to get it into
vituperative. Yeah. It reminds me of the word velociraptor.
Yes. Yeah.
If you're worried about being crazy, you're probably not crazy. If you're worried that you're being a jerk, you're probably not being a jerk. And if you're worried that you're not qualified to do a good job, you
might
probably
be qualified to do a good job.
And I think
because it requires the worry.
The point of all those things is the intention.
The concern for
the intention. Yes. I don't intend to be a jerk, so I am worried about being a jerk, which means if I find that I have been a jerk, I will fix it. I don't intend to be a useless tool, which means that if I worry about being a useless tool and find out that I am being a useless, uninformed tool, I will fix it. Therefore, you're solving your own problem. It's a what's that thing? Self-fulfilling prophecy. If you're worried about being a jerk, you're probably not going to be a jerk. If you're worried about being an uninformed, useless tool, you're probably not going to be an uninformed, useless tool.
So that's been my wrestling match this last week. A lot of last week was how do we, and it's what we started the show with, which is what terms can we use aside from superior or elite or author, authority. How do we find non-hierarchical terms for
Intelligence?
for excellence, for people who actually strive for excellence in their various fields of knowledge and endeavor. And how do we?
Well, what does excellence mean to you?
I want to fetishize another group.
You do or don't?
I think it's worth doing.
You want to fetishize a group?
Well, we fetishize sociopathic, megalomaniacal millionaires.
You mean, well, people didn't mean to fetishize sociopaths and megalomaniacals.
Well, that's the way it worked
They
out.
were fetishizing the ability to be rich if I wanted to be.
Which attracted a lot of sociopaths and megalomaniacal maniacs.
Yes, unfortunately. So you want to fetishize people who think carefully?
I think before you can make these changes in economics, you have to make a change socially. I think at one point, excessive wealth has to be seen as, and we've already moved in that direction. Like, excessive wealth is starting to be seen as a little grotesque.
Yes.
In the general public. Starting to.
Right.
Maybe
if there are people who are starving, other people shouldn't have extra money lying around.
It starts to look a little gauche. So a lot of wealthy people have started downplaying their wealth, slumming it, so they don't make themselves targets for attacks.
Yeah.
Right? So that's a movement. That's a movement towards, now it's a matter of, like, instead of downplaying your wealth, how can we upplay other social capitals?
Yeah. Because you can have a scarcity of literal money and an abundance in a lot of other places.
Yes.
And how do we trade our abundances with each other and leave the mighty dollar behind on the table?
Yeah, I think rather than making the big shift to another economy, we have to make a consciousness shift first. There's already talk of the sharing economy. This is what the co-creation folks and the meta-modernists are talking about, the sharing economy. That's what a lot of the internet culture has been about, is sharing freely. As a photographer, I didn't put watermarks on my photos. I just put a creative caption license and said, if this is not for you making money off my work, but sharing information, use my photos.
Yeah.
That's a part of the sharing economy. People see those photos, and then I have photos all over the world now that are being used by nonprofits that I feel good to have contributed an image that helped narrate an event.
Right.
And I didn't make any money from that, but I feel like I generate some social capital by being somebody who's been at those places and done that thing.
Yeah.
So.
And shared a product.
I think we can start looking at each other's capital, celebrating each other's capital. I've noticed that in the course of the show, one of my friends in South Africa, who I met, one of the DJs from Nangoma FM 88.3, he's been doing posts all day long where he is doing appreciation posts.
Aww.
So he posts a photo of the Prince, Bo Zulu, as a sign of appreciation for who this guy is and what he's doing. So he's found a picture, Quebeco, and I'm gonna miss the click on the Q, but Quebeco Dlela Kwanangoma Osutu added a photo to his page, an appreciation post for Dark Sevier. So
aww.
He's appreciating me in South Africa for just being a human on the planet.
What did he say about you?
Didn't say anything about, he's just showing images of the people that he appreciates.
I'm in that photo.
Yeah.
Hopefully I'll get to meet him someday.
So I think it's worth taking stock and appreciating the folks that we know around us. I've done that this week. I've been trying to reach out to people whose opinions and perspectives that I appreciate.
Yeah.
And trying to pool those into a place so that I don't have, the best way I could say it is when you have the general commons, that's where you get to meet people. But the most productive conversations are probably not going to be in the city square. They're going to be at the pub.
Not everybody is going to be your tribe, and that's okay.
Right. So I've enjoyed meeting vast numbers of people through social media. I'm currently really interested in working on trying to have more concentrated groups of people to have conversations where all of the qualifications for all the terms don't have to be trotted out every time you do something. You don't have to worry about stepping on somebody's toes.
Well, we can have a productive conversation about something maybe on step 2 or step 3 instead of always trying to get past step 1.
Yes. So we have dusted off and are starting to polish up the Post-Orthodoxy Facebook page. If you are a friend of that, please, we're trying to make it not top-down. We're trying to make it crowdsourced. So we're looking at, if you have topics that you would like to see talked about on the show, if you would like to be on the show, if you would like to write something for the show, we are trying to carve out a space, a salon of sorts, where important ideas can be brought out and talked about. Please feel free to contribute on the Post-Orthodoxy Facebook page. And thank you for everybody who contributed on the chat on our Facebook.
Very much so.
And also thank you to all the radio listeners that will be hearing this Sunday.
Thursday. Yeah. It is Sunday right now.
Yes.
All right, guys, we're going to cut it off cold turkey because otherwise we'll just keep blithering and blathering forever, I guess.
Yeah, thanks for participating. We do this twice a week.
See you on Thursday at 4.
Yeah, cheers.